What's going on, everybody? Mr. Danny here again, and today I'm going to show you how I made this cherry picture frame with walnut inlays and miter splines. But before I do that, I need to let you know that I actually lost the footage on how I did these inlays in the front here. So if you are specifically interested in that, I will have another video coming out here pretty soon on how I went about doing those. But otherwise, let me show you how I did the rest. Okie dokie. Well, we're starting where I left off after I had glued the inlays into all these pieces here. I'm just cutting off the excess at the table saw and getting them all to the same dimensions. And this is not a great camera angle, but I'm just taking them all over to the router table there and putting a 3/8 rabbet on each piece. 3/8 depth and width. Once the rabbets were cut, I just marked the size on the inside of the frame there, so I know that I'm going to be okay to hold both the glass and the artwork. This was a 16 by 20 inch frame, and I usually go a little over, probably I'd say about 3 inches over on each piece just to sneak up on the right size. So here I'm at the miter saw, and I cut one miter on each piece first, and then once I have a miter on all of them, then I'll just stack two pieces together to make sure that they're identical, both the long pieces and both the short pieces. Like you can see here, I just put a clamp on it just so they won't move at all, and I just kind of shave off enough so that they're both identical. Once they're all cut, I just bring them all over and glue up the corners with a strap clamp. And I gotta say, this thing made it way easier than last time. I've been making frames just using like the blue tape method, which works just fine. But man, this saves a lot of time having those corners cinched up like that. It just doesn't move around as much, and there's not as much adjustments after you've had it all glued up. So it was pretty nice. I'd recommend it. So I'm taking the clamp off, and I get some pretty good results here, but I did notice that one of the corners was a little bit out of alignment, and you can see there on the inlay. But I don't think it had anything to do with the glue up itself, like the corner moving around. I think it had to do more with the width of the groove for the inlay there. I think there was an issue there that I'll have to pay attention to a little bit better next time. Once I had the frame all glued up, I just hooked it up to my spline jig and cut grooves in each corner so that I could fit some walnut splines to give it some more stability so it won't move around when the weather changes. So this to me has got to be the most challenging part of making any picture frame, is cutting the material for the splines that go in the corners. I swear I did this over and over again, and it would either be too thick and it wouldn't fit, or it was too tight, or it was too loose, wiggling around. So you really have to just use some trial and error here. Eventually I get the right size, and once you do that, I'd recommend, I don't know how you would do it, with your setup, but I use that little miter gauge and hook up a block to it so that you can just move your fence as a reference and continually get the same size for each piece that you're going to cut for miters. So I'd recommend that. Once I had the right size, the right width of spline material, I just cut some triangle shapes out on the bandsaw and then started gluing up the corners and a little bit of glue on each piece and just dropped them in there. Cleaned up the excess and let all of that set for about 30 minutes. Then once the glue was all set up, I cut off most of the excess using a flush cut saw. And because this was my first inlay ever in the world, I did have some gaps that I needed to fill, so I just used some sawdust and glue and created some filler. But the end result actually looked pretty good. As long as you don't have any massive gaps you need to fill, I think this method works just fine. Sanded down to 240, just knocking off the rest of that spline material, getting it down to the flush with the frame. And I had a lot of burn marks I had to sand off here too. I hadn't cleaned my blades in a while, so cleaned your blades, everybody. Then I just gave it a hand sand on the corners to, smooth out the edges so it wasn't as sharp and dangerous. And then this here was suggested by my wife. My wife! That's my Borat impression. This is 00 abrasive pads that you can use to get these scratch marks. If you have any scratch marks left over from sanding, one of these will work just fine. So it's all prepped here, and I'm using a tack cloth just to get the residual dust and debris off before I start finishing. I never really believed in using tack cloths. I didn't think it made that big of a difference, but I would challenge you to give it a try, because it actually does. It makes a little bit of a difference. And, if you're spending this much time on a project, you may as well, right? It takes 10 seconds. And the moment you've all been waiting for, this is 2 coats of blonde shellac, which is my regular method. This stuff dries so quickly. It's really nice. It's all natural. It bonds to itself and almost any surface, and it dries in about 15 seconds, and you can reapply another coat. It's the best. So I know you can sand between coats using shellac as well, but I've found if I just use 2 coats and then I buff it at the end using just a clean dry rag, to me that works the best, and it actually is the shortest amount of time, so you're not reapplying over and over again. I keep showing you that corner. That's the bad one, but everything else turned out great. You can see the inlay there and the marbly figure. So this is the finished product, and I couldn't be happier with it. Besides that one corner, everything turned out great. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe and comment, and I will see you next time.